So let me start by saying the background for this guideline is the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. Flawed sampling leads to flawed decisions. So if we get wrong samples, we're going to get the wrong decisions out. Which these samples may not seem like much, but we make multi-million, multi-billion-dollar decisions off of these samples. And I just realized I'm not sharing my screen. That might help. There we go. So this guideline is really built to reduce those hidden risks, increase stakeholder confidence and understanding of the value, and to provide some practical, industry-wide, actionable guidelines. So this guideline so far, it's been developed by 30+ experts from across 5 continents, wide range of disciplines. And it's really focused on creating a practical guideline, not prescriptive. So it's not going to list, this is how you take samples, this is what you have to do, but it's a guideline. These are suggestions, these are ideas, these are things to consider. So for example, who would have thought stakeholder engagement in sampling? It's actually quite important. So where we are right now is a small subcommittee, about 5 of us are working on simplifying the document. It's currently at about over 80 pages. So we're trying to reduce that, make it simpler, easily, something more easily to digest. And it also contains a real world case study that's been anonymized. And we want to thank and acknowledge that company who provided that information, which is great. So our entire value chain depends on sampling. Try to explain that to an MD or GM sometimes. But if we get these samples wrong, then everything down the line is wrong. Our models, our business cases, everything. So as I said, flawed samples lead to flawed decisions. At the moment, there's currently no industry standard out there. So you go to company A, they'll have their methodology. You go to company B, they have their methodology. I know South America has a very prescriptive methodology versus the rest of the world. And this creates issues and problems because we all say, many people say, oh, I'm a geometallurgist, but they mean different things. So because of this, we came up with this guideline has been developed at the moment, and it's taking into consideration stakeholder confidence and regulatory compliance as well. So things like JORC, 40 and 4101, I can't remember them all. But really, I know from experience or what I've heard actually, at some point, JORC will be incorporating Geomet. So it's in prime time that we actually sort this out now and get some alignment on how we're going to do this. So the guidelines are outlined with introduction to sampling and definitions. What is geometallurgy? What is a geometallurgical sample? What's the rationale for selecting samples? How do you do it? What do you need to consider? And then also things like stakeholder engagement. How do you go about that? Who should be included? What do you need to inform them of? And then we also have that case study tools and template that will be available. So to start, a few terminology, things that are important. A geomet sample, it's a physical rock material that is designed to capture variability. That's critical that we note it's to capture variability, and it's a physical rock sample. This isn't an assay sample. These are different. The focus case, what are we trying to answer? What is the question we want to answer? Performance driver, those are the behaviors we want to understand, we want to model. And then the sample framework, the drill subset. What are we going to sample from? Commonly, we're stuck with a new deposit, intense drilling in the heart of it, where it's high grade, less drilling in the outer ranges. in the periphery. How do we manage that? So it's around that variability. So this diagram is to show the different types of data that we commonly obtain in drilling and mining campaigns, and some of the terms that are used we want to use to predict. So really the focus here is around that geomet block model. Usually when we start, we have a lot of data in that drilling database, tons of information there. But then as we go to the top here, we can see simulated operating data. In the beginning, it's very small, very limited amount of information. So how do we best get from that drilling database to those operating decisions, those predictions? And that's where Geomet comes in, is how do we start getting samples to make those proxy decisions? Proxies, they're quick, they're easy, they're cheap. The metallurgical information, that's more complex, it's more expensive, and we have fewer samples. So how do we get those proxies to make similar predictions? For the purpose of this guideline is to really focus on what I have in that red box, and that's on getting the samples that will provide that variability information. So things like bulk samples, we're not talking about those. We're targeting variability, getting the right sample at the right scale. So just to put it in perspective. So a representative geomet sample, it must reflect the correct proportions of rock types and textures. So we can't over-collect high grade because that's what's there. We need to capture the full range. We need to capture that full variability. The samples must have spatial distribution and temporal distribution, not just what we're going to mine tomorrow. What are we going to mine in 5 years, 10 years? We need to maintain the integrity of the samples, and we need to comply with those test work specifications. How much material is required? Can it be chip, or must it be core, something more competent? And ultimately, this is to help reduce risk. We're not looking for perfection. We're just looking to reduce that risk and that variability. So I'll start with a case study here. So it's an early stage project aiming to map the key metallurgical variability. And those performance drivers in this case was comminution, the CWI. What was established is there was a clear team established with roles. The resources, equipment, etc., was aligned and accounted for, and they got across the board project alignment. So everybody agreed on the budget, the schedule, performance drivers. So this is our deposit. It's the River Stour iron ore deposit, high-grade hematite deposit of 61+% iron, with some deleterious ferruginous shales and non-economic banded iron formation here. So the performance drivers chosen in this case were things like lithology, texture of the rock, the geochemistry, and density. So these attributes were key to understanding the performance predictions, and these would be used by the metallurgists to define the expected process route. So using the available data that they had, it was existing drill hole information, geology, wireframes, which you can see to the right there, and then the block model defined to date. So they planned a iterative sampling strategy, which focused on material that would be entering the plant over the next 5 years. This is material with greater than 50% iron. And they used their focus drivers, the drivers to test sample numbers. So in this case, they were looking at lithology, and texture. And we can see here in this table, they have proportions of the various material types. So we can see this hematite conglomerate, we have very tiny amount, and of the BIF as well, whereas over-representation of the hematite laminated. So what the team did is they translated that into their sample numbers. Because this hematite laminated has the most material, they took the most samples from there. Where they had the least amount of material in the model, they took the least number of samples. So why is that important? Well, when we start looking at things like the geochemistry and density here, we can see the proportions there. It's not a nice Gaussian distribution. So we want to align our sampling to make sure we align with these distributions, where if we have a lot of that material, we need more samples. Very little of that material, we need fewer samples. So they had so the requirements were they need 10 to 20 fragments, so we can use chips, but the chips need to be 50 to 70 microns in size. So to achieve this with the available samples they had, which comprised half core of HQ size, they determined they need five continuous meters of composite. So what that means is they can't go take a few meters, little bit here, a little bit there. They need a continuous section where they can get an even distribution of that size fraction. The team made sure they did not cross lithology or textural boundaries for the study. And as I said, they must be continuous. So we can see here, over the last 3 years, they did a systematic sampling over every X number of meters with a random start. And they got a good spatial distribution. So you can see here, we've got a nice grid, and everywhere there's a star, they took a sample. So those are all their geomet samples. So we have a nice distribution over the whole ore body. It's not clumped in one spot. So using this information, they compared the number of geomet samples took to the proportion of those material types in the block model. And we can see for the two with the most, for the classic laminated, they have a good distribution of samples to material and ore type. A little bit of BIF, a little bit of the other one, and no shales. So is it a crisis? We don't have any of that ferruginous shale? No, but we need to document it. We need to document that we don't have representativity of that unit. And that needs to go into the interpretation. That's a gap in our model. Now, doing the same thing when we look at variability across the different assay values, elements, and density, we can see fairly good distribution. There are a few shortages in some areas, but that's just the reality of it. But particularly here for density, we can see there's an under-representation of that 5 to 5.2 category. Again, that's just a factor of availability, but it could probably and will affect the interpretation. So again, we just need to document it. Here's a risk. So here we can see in the end, we've got the plan view, we've got cross-sectional views here, and we see it's a good distribution across the deposit and across the mining sequence with all samples required for the test. And I think, yes, so here's a little video that will show you not just in 2D, but in 3D, the distribution of the samples taken, with the orange being the geomet samples. So as it goes through, you'll see we're not just taking samples in XY, we're also going in Z space. So, so in summary, what have we achieved to date? We've been able to establish and align and come up with the resources for a very strong, this is for the case study. This team established alignment, and they had good resourcing. The geology was reviewed, the focus case was defined, they had a good sample framework, and they collected a representative set of samples. Key learnings from this was they identified data gaps i.e. the shortage of shale samples and shortage of density. And that was fine. They can then go next to an iterative stage of sampling where they can justify further drilling or other resourcing needs to get those samples. And then they keep assessing the representativity. So sampling isn't a once-off. This is an iterative process. We need to do it over and over and over. So with that, our next steps are we're looking, fingers crossed, hopefully at the end of this month, we'll have a final draft ready that will go out for peer review to select a group of individuals. We'll get their feedback, and then hopefully within Q2, we'll have the final draft that will go out for formal review through the GMG group. And hopefully by the end of Q3, or at least the end of this year, it will be published, ready for publication. So thank you. With that, I'll hand back to Heather.